Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're talking about the feat Observant.
Wow, I'm observant. I'm seeing my surroundings. I'm not actually observant as a human being. I'm very oblivious to what like the world around me. I'm the kind of person that you'll be like, "Hey, can you spot the single item in this empty room?" And I'll be like, "I can't see it. I just don't know where it is. I don't know where I left my shoes, even though they're sitting right directly in front of the door."
Is this you, Sam, or are you
This is me, Sam, as a
criticizing this
person.
feat already?
Oh, no, no,
All
no. This
right.
feed is this feed is different. I don't know how to feel about Observant. Okay, so it's relatively simple. It says quick to notice details of your environment. You gain the following benefits: increase your int score or wisdom score by 1 to a max of 20. If you're a spellcaster, like a cleric or a wizard, if you've got an odd score, this is great. I love that. It also says, if you can see a creature's mouth while it is speaking a language you understand, you can interpret what it's saying by reading its lips. This is a cool little ability. I like this ability a lot, actually. And if there were like any other small bonus, I'd be all for this feat. And there's a much larger bonus coming after this. And it's you have a +5 bonus to your passive wisdom perception and passive intelligent investigation scores. And that's a whole can of worms. Like, that is a lot to break down. That varies pretty wildly game to game. Like, Bob, how frequently do you play with passive perceptions checks? And
Look, that's different than when the DM says, roll me a perception,
yes.
correct? All right, then never.
Oh, good.
Like every time it's just been roll me a perception.
And I think that's like ultimately the problem with Observant is it uses a mechanic that's not always run at all. And when it is run, it's sometimes then lets this feat kind of take over the game. So oftentimes what will happen is Observant, whenever a monster is hiding from you, for example, if you were trying to spot a sneaking in burglar or whatever, the DM would check your passive perception score, which hypothetically they'd have on hand, but sometimes they'd ask for it. And then they would compare that to the stealth roll of the creature that's trying to hide from you. And this is whenever you're deliberately not seeking things out. These are the environments where you don't know you need to be perceiving things right now. So
Actually,
it's just
well, like, all right, that's a little different then, because if I said I would like to roll a perception check, then yeah, I'm actively doing it. But when the DM just says everybody roll me a perception check, that's
that. So everyone roll me a perception check is not what happens here. What happens here is that you have a flat score that is equal to 10 plus your bonus that you add to your perception checks that determines your passive perception score. So if you're proficient in perception, you have a +2 wisdom, your passive perception score is a 14. They won't ask the whole group to roll. That often is done in place of passive perception. They will simply check, okay, Bob is a 14 passive perception. I will then say that you observe something shady. If that beats their stealth check that they rolled, you may never know it even happened. You might be it's more of the thing where you aren't asked to have any kind of perception roll at all, but sometimes you'll be told about things and other times you won't be. And that's based off of the passive perception.
Then what's the difference between those two scenarios I just gave you?
Okay, in scenario A, you don't know there's something, or in your scenario where everyone rolls a perception check in place of using passive perception, you know at least there was an event occurring. There's some meta element to it, right?
All right, that's and the one I said before that, where I say, all right, I walk into this room, I want to roll a perception check.
The difference there is your character is physically looking around the space, whereas this is more of your character. What do they generally observe, right? So if you walk into a dungeon room, you walk into like a crypt, for example, you have a bunch of different things you could do. Like, oh, there's the DM gives you the general description of the room, and then you might say, well, I want to see a little bit deeper into it. I want to make an investigation check into an element of it, or I want to make a perception check to look for things that I might not have noticed just passively. Those things, before you even made your decision to say you wanted to make a passive perception check, were already told to you through your passive perception. What the DM sort of narrates to the group is what passive perception somewhat encompasses. So that is where I would make the distinction, kind of, as to like how you're supposed to use it. Now, a lot of DMs don't. A lot of DMs have what they're going to say, and when players make perception checks that happen to be good, they'll sometimes treat them like an investigation check and give them a little bit more information about specific fine details and stuff.
That's typically how games I've played have been run.
That's typically how games are run, because navigating passive perception scores is just one extra thing that DMs don't necessarily want to have to track or think about, right? It's just an extra layer of, I don't want to make 5 secret checks for myself to know what the group is experiencing and then divvy up, okay, you have a past perception of 17, so you saw these things. The rest of the group didn't necessarily notice those things, though, so I have to tell you this discreetly in case you maybe want to withhold that information or you don't care to share it or something like that. It's a whole big can of worms. And it ends up being like the party kind of has a passive perception of whoever's the highest is. It's a whole ordeal, which is why I was like, I don't want to necessarily open this giant can of worms, but we have to because that's all Observant really does, is give you a giant passive perception score. Because like +5 is enormous. +5 is so big. It's so big. Let's break from passive perception and talk about the other interesting element of this, which is lip reading.
Yeah.
How do you rate that?
It's something I've never attempted to do, but it is kind of cool. Like, it's different than the comprehend language sort of thing where like, who cares? Everybody speaks common. I don't feel like this being an element I have to deal with. In this case, if I'm like across the room, I'm not hearing that conversation, but if I want to get some information, perhaps, then this is a like not really detectable way. Like I could cast a clairvoyant spell or something, but or arcane eye or whatever. But then it's like, all right, what's that dude casting spells over there for? This is just I'm hanging out, and now I got some information, which is potentially cool. I've never done it, but
this is definitely the kind of feature to me that feels like it's telling you, oh, here's a neat idea that your character can do. There probably would be a skill check related to this if you were like, didn't have the observant feat, right? If someone said, I want to read this character's lips from across a crowded room, I'd be like, okay, give me an investigation check or give me an intelligence-based check to sort of like reading, understand the language of the lip movement, right? I don't know exactly. I'd probably just the investigation, but sure. In this case, you just know, which means you kind of have this new tool that you can weaponize a little better than other people can, hypothetically, right? This isn't something that like all characters are unable to do, but yours definitely can do it and can do it perfectly. And that's kind of nifty. That's kind of novel. Like you said, this is across a crowded tavern. You can just be like, what are they talking about? Wait for it. Those words, those words, those words, and then just speak what they're saying. And it's a super cool little gimmick. I think it's really nifty. I like it a lot.
I think it is cool, but I don't like how. I think for the game, this should be like you said, a skill check. Anyone can attempt it, and even if you have this will give you a +5 or something. But yeah, I don't necessarily like that. It's a switch that's either on or off.
I actually, for something like this, I don't hate that it's an on or off switch. I don't hate having some characters have their defined elements be consistent, and this is definitely consistent. This is if my character is an expert at reading lips, and Observant gives me exactly that, they will not fail to do this. Ever. No D20 result will have an outcome where I can't at least read a character's lips. I think there's some novelty to that. I think there's some benefit to it. Like we talked about.
There's certainly benefit to it. I guess realistic shouldn't be the aim I'm going for, but
nope, not even a little bit. We're casting fireballs here, Bob.
Yeah.
We're not looking for realism.
I just feel like it's always like it's something you should always be able to fail at, because reading lips is difficult.
Yeah, you know what else is difficult? Conjuring beings into existence with the will of your mind. That's also pretty difficult.
All right, yeah.
You don't have a chance.
This is a low bar. Okay.
Yeah, reading glyphs seems very achievable to me. So yeah, I pulled out the basic rules for passive checks just to touch back on how this like functions, and there are ways that you can. It's really short. It's just like 3 paragraphs, and it's supposed to work for more than just perception. But like every character sheet has a little passive perception section of it with the intention of being like, this is how DMs kind of influence and talk about the world. I have found Observant with that +5 bonus that's the real reason people didn't take it, and they do it at tables where passive perception is a big element. And the moment someone has like a +20 a 20 in their passive perception, it's very difficult to run anything sneaky or shady past them. It's very difficult to have hidden elements and ambushes function without it feeling incredibly unfair, just because you're in a situation where it's, okay, they will definitely see anything with like a 5+5 or less stealth pretty consistently, like over 75% of the time they'll detect +5 stealths of just things setting up ambushes and hiding and whatnot. And every element of that ambuscade has to be at that +5 level for it to not be observed by the observant player.
Well, I mean,
this will then
you took observant. I mean, get some benefit out of it.
Agreed, but so the benefit is discrete, and the benefit is entirely on the DM to dictate how much it actually works. If a DM can still say, I want this ambush to work, I'm going to crank up their stealth scores to +7, +9, and then the observant player feels like they're being scammed, right? The observant player goes, I didn't even see the rolls, I didn't even see what the results were, I took a feat specifically to not be ambushed, to take this +5 perception, and now I'm getting ambushed anyway. And that feels like shit. At the same time, an observant player often will go, and the DM will say, well, I have an observant player at the table, so I can't really challenge them with these things anymore. I'll give them different challenges. And they just never notice hidden things, because they stop putting hidden things in the world because the observant feat kind of defeats them. And you have this weird catch-22 where it either feels like it's doing nothing because it is doing nothing, or feels like it's doing nothing because you feel like you're getting scammed by the DM. And it's the middle ground in the middle is really hard to nail on the head perfectly to make it feel like you are a little bit more observant. You can detect things that your allies can't, but there are a couple of super sneaky things that can get around you. There are a couple super sneaky, rogues or assassins that can get through an observant character's passive perception. And that's all assuming you're playing with passive perception at all, which is not a given. There are plenty of tables where the DM is fresh or just doesn't like the mechanics. I personally don't like the mechanics that much. Point where like I'll steer players away, like, hey, I don't think observant's going to benefit you much at my tables for like this exact reason, just to say I don't engage with passive perception that much. So, even at tables where it's supposedly good, there are some issues with it. I don't like this feat for that reason, and that's,
All right, let me run this by you. All right, you're playing with passive perception. You the DM, you got a character with observant.
Okay.
Now you're thinking, they're gonna jack up their stealth, or I have to just not put ambushes in here. I don't think. All right, so what do you like? All right, whatever you were using in place of ambushes, you can have that, but also have some ambushes and be okay with this guy spotting them.
So yeah, that is the good DM hack, right? Is whenever a player builds a paladin with an AC of 30, you should be throwing shit at them that will miss, right? You should be throwing high hit monsters that aren't going to connect to their AC at them so the player can feel like they built that character correctly. But that's not often what occurs. I'm not advocating for those solutions. I'm saying that is what often occurs as DM'd solutions for these problems, right? Especially whenever the objective of the DM often feels like it's to challenge players. It's often to, I want my players to have every single encounter feel like it's right down to the wire. I want all my players to feel like every single time they play this game, it's close and they're almost on death's door and they have to really try a bunch of different things to get things to function, to get their character sheets working. And in something like Observant, or the AC 27 Paladin is actually kind of similar to this, it feels like a really odd binary, because if you're that DM, it can be odd to say, well, I'm going to deliberately throw an encounter I know one character automatically beats at them. And that's weird, right? That can feel like this is unintuitive. Like, I'm not challenging my players. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do as a DM by presenting them with a problem that I know they already have a solution to, that they'll easily be able to breeze through because they have that solution to it. I would advocate for DMs out there, give players some softballs like this. Give players opportunities for their characters to do what they put on their character sheet. They do it well. Let them be the experts in the specific environments. And then also throw unique challenges at them. You have to mix things up. But whenever you have 2 sessions a month, it can be really tempting to just throw the harder problems at them. It can be really tempting to go, all right, I'm going to design encounters to challenge things they're not good at so that they can have a little bit more of a challenging encounter rate. So they can have a little bit more drama at the table. There's a lot of nuance here that's difficult to blanket statement talk about, but how I've seen these kinds of things get run, how I've seen DMs propose solutions and run solutions to it, can feel like some players are making choices that don't matter. And especially with a mechanic that's as underused as passive perception is, it makes this feat even harder for me to really justify recommending to people.
All right, how about this? All right, you've got the ambush. They're waiting on you. Instead of making all right, you determine how much of an advantage that gives the enemy if your party doesn't have this observant. Right?
I want to pause real quick.
Okay.
How do you determine that?
I don't know. You're an experienced DM. You run a million of these.
Here's a peek behind the screen.
Oh.
You make it up.
Yeah.
The vast majority of DMs, at least from my perspective of DMs I've talked to and played with, when you're determining the difficulty, it really is just a binary. It's really just do I want my players to succeed or fail at this out the gate? So you kind of have to go into it knowing, like, all right, the numbers that I'm putting are all relative to my party. A experienced DM will know that, and they'll go, do I want them to succeed or fail here? Or to what level do I want them to succeed or fail here whenever you're setting up your encounters? Anyway, continue. So determining it is still kind of arbitrary, but let's say we've determined the adequate challenge that you're going for.
Okay, so without anybody having the observant feat, all right, these guys are going to get ambushed. How much of an advantage does that give the enemy? Mm-hmm. But now somebody does have the observant feat. They're probably gonna spot this ambush a mile away. Make the monsters more difficult.
Sure, that, like, again, it's challenging, right? Because that we're looking at a binary operator, right? We're assuming like the DM knows exactly how much benefit that the ambush provides, which could have been spotted anyway by players simply saying, I don't like something's up, I detect some bullshit about, I'm going to make some perception checks, I'm going to make some investigation checks, I'm going to scout ahead or whatever. Then we can say, like, okay, well, now if we include an observant player versus if I didn't include an observant player, but that's not a scenario that's happening. It's not like there's a Schrodinger's observant character. There's a known fact. The character party has observant or doesn't. So then how you adjust the things where you say, okay, they have observant, how would I treat them if they didn't have observant? Doesn't really matter because you already know what the reality of the circumstances are. So, like, when it comes to DM prep, which notably, I would like to point out, we're not referencing player agency at all here. We're saying everything observant does is on the DM side of things. Players, if you pick this feat, you're not making any decisions around it.
That's a good point.
To its detriment, right?
Yeah.
If you're taking this feat, you're saying, I'm providing my DM these issues to solve. I want to feel observant. Then you should make me feel observant. And that's not, they don't, the DM doesn't make the player with Great Weapon Master feel like a master of great weapons. It's when you add the +10 to hit and cleave something in half, you feel like a great weapon master. So, that's not ideal. I think the reading people's lips can make you feel very observant. I like that a lot. I think that definitely has some agency here, but like the passive perception stuff is entirely in the DM wheelhouse to determine its usability.
Yeah, I will agree with that.
It's messy.
It is messy. All right, well, you got a rating?
I'm gonna give it a 3, but I'm gonna give it a 3 for tables that are playing with passive perception. If you aren't using passive perception actively, but you can make the modifier matter and you like the cute little tool of reading lips and I'm planning on actively using it, it's still probably a 3-ish. So, like, this is going to be very varied. It's going to be some characters are not going to have any real reason to use this, especially if they don't have the int or whiz bond bump in a meaningful fashion. And they don't if you're primarily taking this with the +5 bonus, your mileage is going to vary wildly. And you might be like more harming yourself than helping yourself by taking this kind of feat, depending on how your DM wants to challenge the group, depending on how your DM plans to run encounters for these characters. So, like, I would really highly recommend steering clear of it if the only reason you would want this is the +5 bonus. Beyond that, like, yeah, lip reading is cool. The +1 mod is enough. It's not better than the spell feats, but it doesn't really need to be. It's a little bit of a different tool in your toolbox. So 3 seems fine.
Yeah, 3 seems good.
I don't know.
Before you take this, talk to your DM.
Yeah.
Figure out how they're going to handle the passive perception and everything. Want to be able to read lips and need a intelligence or wisdom bump. You know what you're getting into is there in the description. You watched this video. Well done. You are now prepared to make this decision. All right. Well, that went on longer than I thought. It's a conversation.
Yeah, passive perception is a whole beast. I'm glad we talked about it.
Yeah, I feel cleaner now. All right. Well, that was Observant. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Let us know what you think down in the comments. It's a messy one. Well, I expect some comments. Like and subscribe and all that, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it, a gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.